Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 4, Episode 16, The Outing. Hello everyone, it's nice to be back. I took a week off. My kids had their last day of school, and so we took a trip right after that to Telluride and Moab, respectively. Spent a few days in both of those wonderful places and had a great time. I really found it to be what I needed. For those of you who listened to the last episode, I was I was very, extremely, some might say, and some did say, emotional about the latest horrific mass shooting. I can't even say the latest because there's been at least 6 or 7 since then. But I'm referring to the Uvalde one with those young kids and a couple of teachers who got massacred because this country is so upside down when it comes to just some sensible laws about weapons and guns and, things that most Americans want. But I'm not going to get into that again. Listen to the last episode if you'd like to get into that with me. But yeah, I really needed sort of to unplug. Not that I disconnected from all of those feelings. I still feel them just as intensely, if not more. But sometimes you just need to look at beautiful scenery and watch your kids enjoy themselves on a hike to some beautiful waterfalls or in a hotel pool that's really nice. Just have those breaks, those mental breaks. And so that's what we did as a family. And it was wonderful. So let's get into this episode. The synopsis for this episode from my coffee table book is as follows. And I will preface this with saying that it's, again, really inaccurate, like a lot of these synopses. Okay. Jerry and George are mistakenly outed by an NYU reporter because of a joke Jerry said in the coffee shop. Jerry didn't say it. Elaine said it. George can't shake his emotionally distraught girlfriend until he tells her he's gay. This episode was written by Larry Charles. Okay, so we start in George's car. It's a very short scene. George is trying to break up with his girlfriend, Allison, and she is so upset, devastated, saying she doesn't want to live anymore if she can't be with George. And George says, "Because of me? I'm nothing. No, you're something." Oh my gosh, he tries to convince her. Look, you could throw a rock out the window and hit someone better than me. She's not convinced. She ends the scene with, "You're killing me." It's very dramatic. The actress who plays this dramatic Allison is Carrie Coleman, and we will see her in a couple of more episodes this season. And she has guest starred in every show pretty much in the 90s, 2000s. She's still working to this day. Good for her. And I like her as Allison, especially she has to start out this episode so dramatically, so over the top. And I think her performance is really fun. And especially at the end with the cluelessness when she's reading the article and George is trying to convince her he's gay. I think she's really funny. Next, we are in Monks. George is telling Elaine that he had no choice but to stay with her. She said she'd kill herself. And Elaine's like, "Over you?" Oh, I love that reaction. "Yes, is that so inconceivable?" Elaine's like, "Well," oh, I love it. While they're talking, Jerry is on the payphone in the back of Monks, and he's inquiring as to where this reporter from NYU is. He was supposed to meet her. Back at the table, Elaine and George are discussing Jerry's birthday gifts, and George says he got him 2 tickets to Guys and Dolls. Elaine hopes he'll take her. George's like, "No, I'm going to go with him." Elaine says she got him a 2-line phone. Jerry returns to the table. He's pretty frustrated. He couldn't get a hold of this reporter. And George is like, who is this? "Oh, she's a grad student who works for the NYU newspaper. She doesn't even know who I am. She's never seen me." Elaine says, "Never seen you? Got to envy that." Jerry says, "You've been developing quite the acid tongue lately." And this delights Elaine, really, with a huge smile on her face. Then they get into this discussion about who the most unattractive world leader is, or was. We see a couple of women in the next booth laughing, and they're clearly eavesdropping. Elaine notices this, and so she kind of tells Jerry, hey, those two girls over there are listening to us. And so she starts in a little loud, saying, you know what, just come out of the closet, you two, and just be openly gay already. George thinks this is hilarious. He's kind of smiling and turns to Jerry. Well, what do you think? You know you'll always be the only man I'll ever love. Jerry's like, I'm not going to go along with this. They say he's no fun. Jerry says, I hear this all the time. People think I'm gay. Elaine even says, yeah, people ask me that about you. And he says, it's because I'm thin, single, and neat. And you get along with women. Well, that puts George in the clear. We see one of the women who was eavesdropping now on the phone. Turns out she is the NYU reporter, and she's calling to leave a message for Jerry, apologizing, I was a little late, maybe I missed you. And as she's hanging up the phone, George and Jerry walk by her. They all make eye contact as they go into the bathroom. The actress who plays the reporter, Sharon, is Paula Marshall. She's guest starred in many shows and was cast in many short-lived sitcoms from the 90s to the 2000s, sitcoms who maybe went for a few episodes, maybe one season, and then got canceled. I think she's adorable and totally Jerry's type. This is believable that they'd be attracted to each other. I think as far as acting goes, she's okay. I'm not a fan of this character very much in general, but she plays it well. Paula Marshall plays it well. Although, I don't know if any of you noticed this, but she's got this New York accent that kind of goes in and out. So that is something I find a little vexing, to use Jerry's term. My thoughts on this scene, the purpose, of course, is to kind of set up everything. Jerry's birthday's coming up. They have gifts for him. Jerry is waiting on this interview with the NYU newspaper, and then we set up the whole Sharon thing. So that's the purpose of the scene, our setup scene. And my thoughts, I laughed enough when I just did it, but I love how Elaine reacts when George says Allison would kill herself if they broke up. That it's just two words and it's just a little perfectly timed chuckle, but the over you, oh, it's so great. And it also flows nicely into the acid tongue response of gotta envy that about the NYU reporter not ever seeing Jerry before. And we're seeing our Elaine becoming the more and more cutting version of herself. There's no more nice Elaine. I don't think we get very much more of like really concerned or sensitive Elaine. No, we're getting to the Elaine we know and love. I do like that Elaine is the playful one here and wants to prank the eavesdropping ladies, and that George is so game for it. It's just another example of how fun their relationship is, George and Elaine, especially when they team up against Jerry. It just makes it that much more fun. I mean, a few moments earlier, she was giving him shit about how he's not suicide worthy, and now they're in cahoots against Jerry's wishes. It's just really fun. And I like how quickly they can go between that, like combativeness and then camaraderie. So fun. Very brother and sister like. Next, we are at Jerry's apartment. George enters and tells Jerry that his porno name would be Buck Naked. Jerry's like, you told me that 2 months ago. George takes off his jacket and asks Jerry, what do you think of this shirt? Jerry's like, I don't know. Allison bought it for him. Yeah, it's not good. Not good. George really does need to get out of this relationship. Jerry's buzzer goes off, and it's Sharon, the NYU reporter. And Jerry explains to George, well, she's coming over here, so we wouldn't miss each other again. And George asks, well, should I stay? And Jerry doesn't mind. Jerry opens the door, and Sharon immediately recognizes him from the coffee shop. Jerry's kind of like, is everything okay? Yeah. And Jerry says even, gosh, you look familiar. Have we ever met before? I don't know. You look very familiar. She walks in. Jerry introduces her to George and it says, oh, yeah, he's going to stick around if you don't mind. Yeah, she'd actually love to speak to him as well. All right. So this scene is sort of a classic one. Through the course of this interview, Jerry and George's answers to Sharon's questions, they could very well support them being a couple, which she thinks that they are based on what she heard at Monk's. They're bickering over this pair. Jerry doesn't like his shirt. And then suddenly Jerry does realize, oh, you're the girl from the coffee shop. George, of course, freaks out. They both try to convince her that they knew she was listening. They made up that whole conversation about them being gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I have many gay friends. My father's gay. She's sort of not backing down. Look, I know what I heard. This New York accent comes out a little bit. It comes out also when she says, you should hear how my boyfriend speaks to me. I'm like, what? Anyway, so she knows what she heard. George offers to have sex with her right now. I mean, he's in full panic mode. Kramer enters and says, I thought we were going for a steam. No steam, no steam. That just adds fuel to the fire. Next, we're still at Jerry's apartment, but a little later. Elaine is there. She's offering to talk to the reporter. You know me. I walk into the room and problem solved. Jerry says, I don't know if she'll talk to us. She said she'd think about it. And then Jerry asks Elaine why she won't take her jacket off. She's wearing this big winter coat. And she's like, I'm all right. Jacket watch. Yay, we have another jacket watch. For any of you new listeners out there, I am tracking the amount of times a jacket concern or storyline or what have you makes an appearance in the series. This is due to a very funny comedian telling Jerry, every time I watch Seinfeld, you guys are worried about a jacket. So I've taken it upon myself as I'm going through this series for the podcast to count. And this is our 10th instance of Jacket Watch, where Elaine refuses to remove her winter coat throughout the episode to the annoyance of Jerry, and then later the annoyance of Sharon and also George, kind of tangentially because of what her jacket stubbornness leads to. So this is our 10th instance of Jacket Watch, and there you have it. Back to the scene. Kramer enters with Jerry's birthday gift, and Jerry says, it's not my birthday. Kramer begs to differ. You be wrong. Well, maybe he's right. Maybe it is my birthday. As he's going to open his gift, once again, he bugs Elaine to take her jacket off. She says, get off my back about the jacket. He opens the gift and it's a 2-line phone. Uh-oh. Elaine has to leave to go return something. Jerry hooks up the phone and Kramer wants to be the first call. He goes back to his place. He calls Kramer and thanks him. It's a great gift. Then he's getting a call on the other line, disconnects with Kramer, and turns out it's Sharon from NYU. And she tells him, I'm not going to play up that angle for the article. And he's like, oh, thank you. He's getting another call. He flips over to the other line and it's George. And Jerry says, oh, you know what? That NYU reporter just called me. She says she's not going to play up that angle, of the article. I guess we fooled her. And Jerry says, hang on, let me get rid of her. So he goes over to the other line and no one's there. She seems to have hung up. As he flips over to George, George says, I can hear you when you're on the other line. I heard everything you said. Oh, no. So that means Sharon might have heard what he said to George, that sort of sarcastic, I guess we fooled her. Uh-oh. Jerry tests it out with Kramer, saying the phone is a piece of junk. Oh, no. Now she thinks we're gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And my thoughts, the purpose of this scene, we're just heightening this whole storyline. And then also we see a little bit more development with Jerry's gifts. And my thoughts, I like how willing Elaine is to help Jerry and George, how happy she is to talk to Sharon. I think that's really sweet. I do think it would have been natural to have a conversation for Elaine to bring up, why would it be so bad, Jerry? Kind of have him really identify, what's so bad about this coming out, and I don't know, there could have been some Seinfeldian reason of why he's so freaked out. And it could be something just shallow, like, well, I don't, it might hurt my chances with women or something like that. But anyway, I feel like there could have been some more, I don't know, self-awareness, I guess is the term I'm looking for, as to why are they so panicked about this? But I have other thoughts about that and I'll bring up later in the episode. The whole jacket thing it's a bit hamstrung in there. Don't get me wrong. I always love when we have another jacket watch instance. But why is this a thing? Where did this come from? Why is Elaine all of a sudden not wanting to take her jacket off? Although, on the other hand, I sort of love that our Elaine is just drawing a line in the sand because she can, pretty much. I mean, I think that thing where, the more people want you to do something, the more you don't want to do that thing. And ultimately, I guess I respect that about Elaine. So keep your jacket on. Doesn't matter. The next scene, we are at Sharon's apartment or dorm room or wherever she lives at NYU. And Elaine enters and thanks her for speaking with her. And right after Sharon offers her a seat, she says, why don't you take your coat off? And Elaine gives her a dirty look. And that's the end of the scene. No notes on this except that Elaine's face is great at the end. I love how stubborn she is about this jacket. Next, we are at Monk's. Elaine is telling George and Jerry how Sharon wouldn't let it go about the jacket, and then she forcibly tried to remove her jacket. Jerry is so annoyed and tells George she wouldn't take her coat off at my house either. They're both so annoyed with her stubbornness about this. This could have solved their issues, with her reporting on the gay thing. And, of course, not that there's anything wrong with that. Then there's a short pause and Jerry tries to forcibly remove Elaine's jacket and they have this little scuffle. George asks, well, when can I read this thing? And Jerry says, well, they're sending it to me. In an effort to lighten the mood, George hands over Jerry's birthday gift. 2 tickets to Guys and Dolls. Guys and Dolls? Isn't that a lavish Broadway musical? It's Guys and Dolls, not Guys and Guys. Okay, yeah, you're right. Jerry says, thank you. Thank you very much. And Elaine has a bag and gives it to Jerry. Oh, lady! I just love that. I think that's so cute. He takes out his gift, and it's the collected works of Bette Midler. He seems a little disappointed. And Elaine asks, well, I thought you liked Bette Midler. Well, she's okay. You said you liked her. Yeah, so what if I like her? So nothing. Everything's just tainted now. Thanks for the CDs. Yeah, you're welcome. Elaine notices 2 people staring at Jerry from the counter. So he goes over there and asks what's going on. And they say, oh, there's a article about you in the New York Post. Well, it turns out the AP picked up the NYU article. I've been outed. I wasn't even in. And now everyone's going to think we're gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that. No, not at all. Real quick, my thoughts. I love that little fight with Elaine and Jerry. It's such another brother or sister sibling moment with them. It's so funny. And the awkwardness of the gift exchange is really funny as well. Everything is just being looked at under a microscope. Oh my gosh, is this going to make me seem more gay or whatever? It's just so awkward. And I also love JLD's so nothing. So annoyed. All right, next we are at Jerry's apartment. Jerry is reading the article out loud to Elaine and George. It mentions the bickering over the cleanliness of a pair. I told you that pair was washed. Kramer enters, carrying a paper, and so much hurt in his eyes and his voice when he says, I thought we were friends. Jerry tries to convince him, look, it's not true. No. The masquerade is over, all right? Come on, Jerry. You're thin, single, late 30s. Jerry says, yeah, so are you. That blows Kramer's mind. He does a very Kramer movement and sound. Then he exits. The phone rings and George answers. It's Mrs. Seinfeld. George? Oh my God. Oh gosh. So Jerry gets the phone. Ma! And then George freaks out because he realizes, oh my God, my mother. He runs out. Jerry is trying to convince his mother it's not true. Morty thinks it's because she accidentally bought him culottes to look like a skirt. But Helen does say, not that there's anything wrong with that, Jerry. Next, we're at the hospital. George is sitting with Estelle, who is back in that similar setup we see in the contest after she catches George masturbating. She's talking about how she fell right off the toilet when she's read the article, threw her back out. The super had to come get her. She was half naked. And she's just at her wit's end. What is going on with George? What is happening? Maybe you're making porno films. Yeah, I'm buck naked. She also adds not that there's anything wrong with it. And then another callback to the contest episode. This time, a male nurse comes in to give a sponge bath to the male patient on the other side of the curtain. And George is very distracted, but this time in more of a fearful distraction type way. So funny. Next, we're at Monk's. Jerry, George, and Elaine are walking to a table, and Jerry mentions, that NYU reporter Sharon called and left a message. I don't know what she wants. So then George starts talking about plans to see Guys and Dolls together, and then they're interrupted by a guy in the military who comes up to the table and tells Jerry he was so inspired by what he did and coming out like that he's going to do the same, even if it means a discharge from the service. And he exits. Jerry's going to pass on the Guys and Dolls. This is all becoming too much. George is so upset and he starts screaming at Jerry and he will not keep his voice down. The manager comes over and he threatens to ask them to leave. And then he has an earring on. I think that's supposed to signify he's gay. I didn't really get it. Maybe I'm forgetting all those weird earring rules back in the day. I have no idea. George says, fine, I'll take Elaine. She's so excited. This is what she wanted originally. And George says, well, don't tell Allison. Oh, right. Has she seen the article? Oh, George realizes, oh my gosh, this is the perfect way to get out of this relationship. I'm out, baby. I'm out. Next, we are back at George's car, and Allison is reading the article and asks, yeah, so? What? Don't you see what this is implying? I'm gay. I am a gay man. She doesn't believe it. Well, ask Jerry. I will. No, don't do that. Jerry's very private. I want to hear it from Jerry. So next, we are at Jerry's place. Jerry and Sharon are going at it on the couch, making out. And she asks him, could she ever forgive me? There's the New York accent again. He says, I don't know. She lays on a big sloppy kiss and he says, no, all right. And then she says, you know, the funny thing was that she was attracted to him immediately. And he says the same, you know, you remind me of Lois Lane. Always have to make a Superman reference. George and Allison bust in and they see what's going on. And so George has to really lay it on thick. Oh my God, Jerry, what are you doing? You're with a woman. Oh, he's trying to get Jerry to play along to convince Allison. This is also confusing Sharon. She's getting freaked out. So she leaves. This is too weird. And then, fine, it's not true. It's not true. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And Allison wants some clarification. He says, fine. George says, I'm not gay. I'm a porno actor. I'm buck naked. Well, she's into that. Really? Oh, my God. Then we see Kramer come by, and he's with a very handsome, dashing man. And they stop and say hello real quick and go into Kramer's apartment. And Kramer turns around and says, he's the phone man. Closes the door, opens it back up, and says, not that there's anything wrong with that. Hands go up. That's the end of the episode. All right, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side. You've invited someone to your house. You greet them warmly. You offer them drinks, food. And the entire time, they don't take their coat off. That's why you need the Coat Enforcer. The Coat Enforcer is a service you can hire for when you have guests who refuse to take their coat off.
Take your coat off.
No, I'm okay.
Take your coat off.
I'm really, I'm a little chilly.
It's 72 degrees in here. Take your coat off.
Okay. There's nothing ruder than someone leaving their coat on. So hire the Coat Enforcer for any of your catered affairs. Perfect for the holidays.
Oh dear, I've just been so cold lately. Take your coat off.
Oh, hello? Who are you?
Doesn't matter, lady. Take your coat off.
Honey, I like to keep... Grandma, you heard him. Take your coat off. Okay. That's right, Grandma. You're not leaving your coat on anymore. If you want to hire a coat enforcer for your next event, visit our website, www.takeyourfuckingcoatoff.net. The Coat Enforcer. You're not cold, you're just an asshole. And we're back. Moving on to the extras, there was an inside look for this episode, and Larry Charles said that he wrote this episode because as the show got more popular as an employee of Seinfeld, people would often ask him if Jerry was gay. He said it was just something in the air then, everyone was curious about Jerry Seinfeld's sexuality. The first table read didn't go very well, and Glenn Padnick, who was one of the producers, says, this can come off really insensitive to the gay community, and we don't want to do that. And so as they were figuring out how to retool the episode, Larry David, Larry Charles, and Jerry Seinfeld would be, discussing how to make this episode better. And Larry Charles was the one who said, well, not that there's anything wrong with that. He just said it in passing. And Jerry immediately said, that's it. That's the line. We have to include that, and we have to say it every single time this comes up. Every time we say gay, we have to say that there's anything wrong with it. That will infuse not only the humor, but also the sensitivity that they wanted. All right, the deleted scenes, I did want to mention, this was something I was kind of craving because I thought that scene between Sharon and Elaine was way too short. And it also seemed very oddly edited, like very choppy. It's like she walks in, she sits down, and it's done. Well, there was more to the scene, and it's so good. Oh, I wish they would have kept it in. We get some really good annoyed Elaine, like, it just keeps heightening to the point where, because basically what happens is Sharon's just like, aren't you hot? I mean, I'm hot just looking at you. Don't you want to take your jacket off? And like Elaine's just, no, I'm fine. Why does everyone want me to take my jacket off? And so Sharon gets more and more irritated with Elaine, and they don't show the forcible, attempt to remove the jacket, but they do show it getting to just a higher and higher level, to the point where Sharon's like, you're making me very uncomfortable because you're not taking your jacket off. It's a great scene. I wish they would have kept it in. We got to see JLD play a little bit more. It was just a lot better. And Elaine gets her very own, not that there's anything wrong with that, because in between Sharon trying to get her to take her jacket off, she's trying to convince her, look, I made that joke up. Jerry is not gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that. So she gets her own moment to say that, which we don't get in the aired version. There were notes about nothing. The only thing I wanted to say about that was that they had a counter, and not that there's anything wrong with that was said 8 times in the episode. All right, moving on to Contributor Corner. I did something a little different this week. I reached out to some of my friends in the LGBTQ community because, well, I am a straight woman watching this episode. So, of course, I have my point of view about it. I'm a Seinfeld fan. So, my viewpoint is my viewpoint. And of course, I express that on this podcast. But I thought with this subject matter, and it's Pride Month too, you guys. I'm recording this on June 9th, so it's we are in Pride Month, and so I thought it was that much more appropriate to ask my friends who are in the gay community what they think of this episode, and is it offensive to them, or their basic thoughts about it. I reached out to a dear friend. He's basically like my brother. His name's Karthik. And I grew up with Karthik. We've known each other since before we can remember, and he came out while he was in college. I still remember sitting with him in Ann Arbor, Michigan, while he was at the University of Michigan. I went to Michigan State. No big deal. Anyway, I was visiting him, and he came out, and I just remember, gosh, I just wanted to like cloak him in all of my support and love, because this was still in the 90s, like mid 90s, not like too long after, in fact, this episode aired. The level of acceptance of that, way different, not like it is now. So I reached out to Karthik, my dear friend Karthik, and he and his husband Zane, they watched the episode, and so they put together some thoughts for me, and this is what Karthik sent. He said, considering 1992, 1993 was the peak number of cases of the AIDS epidemic in the USA, it was amazing for them to say, not that there's anything wrong with that, when most Americans definitely thought there was something very wrong with that. For me, as a closeted 15-year-old that scoured the newspapers every day for any mention of gay people, it was shocking, scandalous, and comforting all at the same time. What really made me laugh was the high and whiny. It's that comment that George makes when Sharon's taping the interview, and he's like, oh no. Karthik says, almost every gay guy I know hates their voice for that reason. In fact, I still can't bring myself to listen to the podcast I was interviewed in recently for that reason. Thank you so much, Karthik. I really value your opinion on this. Another friend of mine who I reached out to, her name is Marianne, and she and I met in the improv community here in Denver. She's fantastic. This is what Marianne had to say about the outing. This didn't age well. There's something a little excessive about Jerry and George's panic at being thought of as gay. That would come across as anachronistic today. I looked up this episode on Wikipedia, and it won a GLAAD Media Award. That surprises me, but I guess things have changed in 30 years. She says in parentheses, yikes, has it been that long? It says something about TV in the early 90s that this would actually win an award. But I guess we have to remember this was the era of Clinton, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and Ellen hadn't come out yet. I don't think from my 2022 perspective this episode is offensive, but it kind of makes me roll my eyes a bit. I did giggle at it, but the assumption that 2 men in their 30s would be so uptight, especially 2 guys in New York City, just wouldn't fly today. Maybe if this took place somewhere like a small town in Oklahoma, but it really wouldn't be funny, just sad. George and Jerry just seem kind of pathetic by today's standards. I guess they were in 1993, but by standards of the day, they at least had some awareness that they were wrong to be so upset about the assumption that they were gay. Thank you so much, Marianne, for those comments. I really appreciate it. And also, again, thanks to Karthik and Zane for taking the time to put those thoughts together. You know, for me, when I watch this episode, something to me, and I've talked about this before on the podcast, where in any of these kinds of maybe cringy things that happen in a lot of these shows, especially from the 80s, 90s, any era that is before, kind of this awakening we're having now in the last few years, you really have to take into account the time, the time that this episode was written and made. And so for me, when I watched this episode, it's really telling about that time. Again, this aired in 1993, and two straight men, they can also, it can happen at the same time. Two straight men can be supportive of the gay community and say, there's nothing wrong with it. If that's who they are, completely support it. But this is still a time where it's not widely accepted or looked at as something empowering or positive. So for their own self-protection, they don't want to be considered gay or outed as gay. So it's this interesting dynamic. And I wanted to read from an article I read. The article is titled "How Seinfeld's The Outing Has Aged," and it's by Peter Majda. And there were a couple snippets I thought were important. He says, though Jerry and George are homophobic, they have dual anxiety. They're afraid of being seen as gay, and they're afraid of being seen as bigots. It's an interesting parallel angst to suffer from. Though Jerry and his pals are misanthropes, only too happy to come off as cantankerous and ugly, they also have enough social grace or awareness to realize that having a tremendously offended reaction to being called gay can be perceived as homophobic. But they are homophobic. Another part of his article that I thought was interesting, he says, the refrain of not that there's anything wrong with that is a recurring theme because no one in Seinfeld is really anti-gay. In fact, despite Jerry's Herculean efforts to deny he's gay, he does casually mention that he's often mistaken for being gay because he's thin, single, and neat. He doesn't seem particularly bothered by this because the presumption of queerness is theoretical. It's only when it becomes concrete, Jerry and George are lovers, that his homo panic comes up. Towards the end of his article, he says, but the episode holds up reasonably well. The sheer panic of two characters is a bit incredulous, though it's funny to see it climb to meteoric heights, especially in the phone scene in which Jerry takes a call from his worried mother and the characters all answer each other with loud cries. It's almost operatic in its stupidity. I thought Peter Majda's thoughts were really interesting, especially this dual anxiety that he talks about. It's like they don't want to be perceived as gay, but they also don't want to be perceived as homophobic. So it's just a lot going on there. I did also go to some reviews by gay people on the IMDb page for The Outing, and I thought this one was interesting. This is by a user who goes by Fox Barking. He says, other reviewers here are completely missing the point of this episode. In the early 90s, nobody felt forced to accept gay people by society. To think that this episode was some sort of satire on liberalism is completely wrong. I came out of the closet a little bit of time before this. Nobody felt like they had to accept gay people, and we were very discriminated against. This episode was monumental in taking positive steps forward in portraying gays on TV and in movies. The not that there's anything wrong with that is not a statement that the characters make because they feel they have to. They make it because they mean it. Before this episode, no one made statements like that. Seinfeld and definitely David were worried about an episode about two men upset that people think they were gay would offend the LGBTQ community. They wanted to make it clear that this was not their intent. Bravo to this episode, which helped to make the world a better place. For anyone who thinks I'm oblivious to the point of this episode, everything I said came straight from Larry David's mouth. The line, not that there's anything wrong with that, is not satire on being forced to accept gay people. It was him telling gay people, we have an episode where two straight men freak out when people think that they are gay, but we want you to know we're not making fun of you. We're making fun of the characters. So that's what Fox Barking thought. Yeah, and I wanted to comment on this. And I read I was just kind of reading a bunch of things about, people's reaction to this in different times as well. Obviously these reviews have to be relatively recent considering, people couldn't go online and review this after it aired. But the fact that the jokes are really mostly about Jerry and George and how ridiculous they're being, how insecure they're being. They're never making gayness or gay people the butt of the joke. But at the same time, not that there's anything wrong with that, but holy shit, there's something wrong with that if people think we're gay. So it is this, kind of complicated thing. Anyway, I just wanted to give some of those perspectives. Certainly no one can deny that it was a groundbreaking episode in the sense that during that time, it wasn't common to be very accepting of gays. I still remember being in high school and it coming up a lot where I would get in these debates with people who it was the whole, oh, people choose to be gay or people are born gay. It was that whole thing. And I'm very much a believer that people are born homosexual. And man, the debates I would get into with it was mostly dudes in my high school who clearly were just uncomfortable with the notion of homosexuality. And yeah, would just get in these debates about well, why would anyone choose to live this lifestyle that is so discriminated against? That's just not an easy path, but that's truly who they are because they were born that way. And so we would just get in these debates. I just remember that a lot. And interestingly enough, a lot of those same guys are very progressive thinking and, allies now to that community, which I'm like, I hope I had something to do with that. I'm sure I didn't. But yeah, so just an interesting, some interesting thoughts I wanted to include since, I am a straight woman and, my opinion is just one opinion. All right, my favorite Elaine moments. I mean, honestly, this isn't a very strong Elaine episode. She had this little jacket plot, and that's about it. The main A story, obviously, is clearly to focus on Jerry and George, and that's totally fine. That's what this episode is about, and that's sort of kind of the most interesting part of the episode. Elaine gets a lot of screen time, but just not a lot of substance. That being said, I have to choose a favorite moment, and I just love the little, like I said earlier, over you. That delivery is so great. It's a little chuckle with it. I love it. I love her giving George a hard time. And my final notes. This is a classic episode of Seinfeld, and I totally see why, considering the subject matter. And just to expand a little more on what I was saying earlier, this topic of homosexuality was not tackled much back in that time, and especially not in sitcoms, and even more especially not with any sensitivity. So just the fact that there was an awareness to have some sensitivity about this subject, I think, and I was reading a lot of reaction from the gay community about that. It meant a lot to them. In fact, this episode won a GLAAD award, which I think says a lot as well. The stronger comedic moments are definitely with Jerry and Jason Alexander, for the most part. That interview scene, it's so brilliantly written, when they're kind of answering Sharon's questions, but it's all supporting this, they could be a couple kind of thing. That whole 2-line phone mishap, really funny, kind of ping-ponging back and forth. George with his mother in the hospital. I mean, anything with Estelle Harris, it's so great. So there's lots of comedy in this episode, but I just wish Elaine could have had more of the comedy pie here. I wish we could have seen that physical altercation with Sharon. Like I said, I wanted that scene to be longer. Turns out it was. It just got cut for time. But even in the deleted version of that scene, we don't get any forcible removing of that coat. But come on, show us. Just show us. Don't just tell us. Please show us that hilarious moment that was described. And I think that's all I can say about The Outing. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.